The charity gala was unlike anything Maya had ever seen before. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen fireworks, casting rainbow patterns across marble floors that probably cost more than her yearly salary. She adjusted her black uniform and checked her reflection in one of the many mirrors lining the grand ballroom. Tonight she wasn't here as a guest. She was part of the catering team, serving champagne and fancy appetizers to people who lived in a completely different world. Maya had taken this weekend job 6 months ago when her regular income as a physical therapist wasn't enough to cover her student loans and help support her family. The pay was good, and she told herself it was just temporary. But standing here among women wearing diamond necklaces worth more than her car, she felt the familiar sting of being invisible to the wealthy crowd. She picked up a tray of sparkling glasses and began weaving through the guests. Conversations floated around her, talk of vacation homes in Europe, private jets, and business deals worth millions. Maya had learned to tune most of it out, but tonight something caught her attention. "It's been 2 years now," a woman in a silk dress was saying to her companion. "Robert Wellington still hasn't accepted what the doctors told him. His son will never walk again, but he keeps throwing money at every specialist who promises a miracle." Maya nearly dropped her tray. She knew that name, Robert Wellington, the real estate developer whose face appeared regularly in business magazines. But she'd never heard about his son. "Such a tragedy," the other woman replied, shaking her head. "The boy was so athletic before the accident. Now he's confined to a wheelchair, and from what I hear, he's completely given up hope. Robert spent millions on treatments, but nothing works." Maya's heart began racing. She'd dedicated her life to helping people recover from exactly these kinds of injuries. Her own younger brother had been told he'd never walk again after a motorcycle accident 3 years ago. The doctors had been wrong then, and Maya suspected they might be wrong now too. She continued serving drinks, but her mind was elsewhere. During her break, she found herself searching for Robert Wellington in the crowd. She spotted him near the auction display, a tall man in his 50s with graying hair and tired eyes. He was bidding on items mechanically, as if his heart wasn't really in it. Maya watched him from across the room. Unlike the other guests who seemed to be enjoying themselves, Robert looked like he was going through the motions. When someone approached him to chat, he managed polite smiles, but Maya could see the sadness behind them. This was a man carrying an enormous weight. As the evening went on, Maya noticed Robert step out onto the mansion's balcony, away from the noise and crowds. She knew she should get back to work, but something stronger pulled her forward. Her supervisor would be angry if she caught her talking to guests, but Maya couldn't shake the feeling that this moment was important. She followed him outside, her heart pounding with each step. The cool night air was a relief after the stuffy ballroom. Robert stood alone at the marble railing, staring out at the city lights below. Up close, she could see the exhaustion etched in his face. "Excuse me, sir," Maya said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Robert turned, surprised to see one of the catering staff. "Yes? Do you need something?" Maya took a deep breath. She was about to cross a line that could get her fired, but she couldn't stay silent. "I couldn't help but overhear some people talking about your son inside. I know this might sound crazy, and I know I'm just someone serving drinks tonight, but I want you to know something." Robert's expression shifted from confusion to wariness. "I'm sorry, but I don't think this is appropriate. I will help your son walk again," Maya interrupted, the words tumbling out before she could lose her courage. Robert stared at her for a long moment. Maya could see a dozen emotions crossing his face: anger, hope, skepticism, and something that looked like desperation. "Who are you?" he asked finally. "My name is Maya Rodriguez. I'm a physical therapist, and I've seen what they call impossible happen before. I've made it happen before." Robert's laugh was bitter. "Do you have any idea how many people have said those exact words to me? How many specialists have promised miracles? My son has been seen by the best doctors in the country. They all say the same thing. The damage to his spinal cord is too severe. He'll never walk again." Maya felt her cheeks burning, but she pressed on. "With respect, sir, doctors said the same thing about my brother. They were wrong. Your brother?" Robert's voice softened slightly. 3 years ago, Alex was in a motorcycle accident. Severe spinal injury, just like your son. The doctors gave us the same diagnosis, permanent paralysis. But I couldn't accept it. I researched everything I could find. I tried techniques that weren't in textbooks. I worked with him every single day for 8 months. And? Robert asked, despite himself. He walked into my graduation ceremony when I got my master's degree. The doctors called it a miracle, but it wasn't magic. It was work, determination, and refusing to give up when everyone else said it was hopeless. Robert was quiet for several minutes. Maya could hear the music and laughter, drifting from inside, but out here the world felt suspended. "Why would you want to help my son?" Robert asked finally. "You don't know us, and I'm sure you've heard that I can afford the best care money can buy." Maya thought about how to explain it without sounding naive. "Because I've been where your family is right now. I've felt that helplessness, that anger at a world that seems to have given up on someone you love. And because I've learned that sometimes the biggest breakthroughs come from people who aren't supposed to be smart enough or important enough to find them." She paused, gathering her courage for what she wanted to say next. "Your son doesn't need more famous doctors or expensive equipment. He needs someone who believes recovery is possible and knows how to make it happen. Someone who won't give up when progress is slow or when setbacks happen." Robert studied her face in the moonlight. Mayao could feel him weighing her words, searching for signs of deception or false hope. "You're very young," he said finally. "I'm 28, and I've been working with spinal injury patients for 6 years. I know I don't look like much in this uniform, serving drinks to your guests. But tomorrow, when I put on my scrubs and go to work, I help people reclaim their lives. That's what I do, and I'm very good at it." The silence stretched between them. Again, Maya wondered if she'd pushed too far, said too much. But then Robert reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. "Call my office on Monday," he said quietly. "Ask for my personal assistant and tell her we spoke tonight. I can't promise anything, but maybe it's time to try something different." Maya took the card with trembling hands. "Thank you for listening to me. I know how this must sound." "It sounds like hope," Robert said, and for the first time that evening his smile looked genuine. "And I haven't felt that in a very long time." As Maya walked back toward the ballroom, she realized her life had just changed forever. She had no idea what she was walking into, but she knew one thing for certain: she was about to fight the biggest battle of her career, and failure wasn't an option. Monday morning came faster than Maya expected. She sat in her small apartment, staring at Robert Wellington's business card for the 100th time. Her hands were shaking as she dialed the number. What had seemed like destiny on Saturday night now felt like complete madness in the harsh light of Monday morning. "Wellington Enterprises, Mr. Wellington's office," came a crisp, professional voice. "Hi, my name is Maya Rodriguez. Mr. Wellington asked me to call about his son. We spoke at the charity gala on Saturday." There was a pause. "Please hold." Maya's heart hammered in her chest during the silence. She was probably about to be politely dismissed by some assistant who dealt with crazy people all day. "Miss Rodriguez?" The voice returned. "Mr. Wellington would like to meet with you this afternoon at 2 o'clock. Do you have our address?" Maya nearly dropped the phone. Yes, I'll be there." The Wellington building was a glass tower that seemed to stretch into the clouds. Maya felt tiny walking through the marble lobby in her best dress, a simple navy blue outfit she'd bought for job interviews 2 years ago. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor felt like it lasted forever. Robert's office was bigger than Maya's entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the entire city. Robert sat behind a massive desk, but when Maya entered, he stood and gestured to a seating area with comfortable chairs. "Thank you for coming," he said, though his voice was guarded. "I'll be honest. I spent most of yesterday wondering if Saturday night was real or if I dreamed the whole conversation." Maya sat down, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. "I understand your hesitation. If I were in your position, I'd probably think I was crazy too. Robert poured 2 cups of coffee from a silver service. Tell me about your brother. Really? Tell me, what exactly happened? Maya accepted the coffee gratefully. Alex was 19 when he crashed his motorcycle. The doctor said he had what they called a complete spinal cord injury at the T12 level. They explained that meant he'd never have feeling or movement below his waist ever again. That sounds similar to what they've told me about David, Robert said quietly. For the first month, I believed them. Alex believed them too. He was so angry, so hopeless. He wouldn't even try the basic physical therapy they recommended. He said what was the point of exercising muscles that would never work again. Maya set down her coffee cup, remembering those dark days. But then I started reading everything I could find about spinal cord injuries. Not just the standard medical texts, but research from other countries, experimental treatments, case studies that doctors here called flukes or misdiagnoses. Robert leaned forward. What did you find? I learned that the spinal cord is much more adaptable than most doctors believe. I found studies about something called neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to create new pathways around damaged areas. I read about patients in Germany and Switzerland who were walking again after injuries similar to Alex's. But surely, the doctors here knew about these treatments? Maya shook her head. That's the problem with medicine sometimes. Doctors are trained to be cautious, to avoid giving false hope. But sometimes what they call false hope is actually the only real hope a patient has. She pulled out a folder she'd brought with her. I put together a treatment plan for Alex that combined traditional physical therapy with techniques I found in research papers. Electrical stimulation to keep his muscles active. Water therapy to support his body weight while he relearned movement. And most importantly, mental training to help his brain remember how to send signals to his legs. Robert took the folder and flipped through pages of medical articles, exercise charts, and photographs. These pictures ... That's Alex learning to stand again after 4 months. And that one is him taking his first steps at 6 months. The doctors said it was impossible, but there he was, doing it anyway. How long did the whole process take? 8 months of intensive work. Every single day, sometimes for hours at a time. It wasn't easy, and there were setbacks that made us both want to quit. But we kept going because we could see tiny improvements. That gave us hope. Robert was quiet for several minutes, studying the photos. Maya could see him trying to imagine his own son in Alex's place. What makes you think you can help David? His injury might be different from your brother's. Maya had been expecting this question. Every spinal cord injury is unique, but the principles of recovery are the same. The key is creating an environment where healing can happen and then working consistently toward that goal even when progress seems impossible. She leaned forward, her voice growing more passionate. Mr. Wellington, I've worked with dozens of patients since Alex recovered. Not all of them walk again. I want to be honest about that. But every single one of them improves beyond what their doctors predicted. Some regain feeling, some gain better balance, others develop enough strength to transfer independently. Recovery isn't always about walking, but it's always about hope. The doctors say David's case is particularly severe. The damage was extensive, and it's been 2 years already. 2 years isn't that long in terms of spinal cord healing. The body can recover for years after an injury if it's given the right support. And sometimes waiting can actually be beneficial because it gives the initial swelling and inflammation time to completely resolve. Robert set the folder aside and looked directly at Maya. Let's say I'm interested. What exactly are you proposing? Maya took a deep breath. This was the moment she'd been preparing for. I want 6 months of complete access to work with David. That means designing a comprehensive program specifically for his needs, working with him every day, and having the freedom to try techniques that might not be in standard medical textbooks. What would you need from me? First, I'd need to convert a space in your home into a proper therapy room. That means specialized equipment for electrical stimulation, parallel bars for walking practice, and a pool, if possible, for water therapy. Second, I'd need David's complete medical record so I can understand exactly what we're dealing with. And third, I'd need your support when progress is slow or when David gets frustrated and wants to quit. Robert was quiet for a long time. Maya could practically see him weighing the decision. The doctors have told us that continuing to pursue treatments might actually be harmful to David psychologically. They say we need to help him accept his new reality instead of chasing impossible dreams. Maya felt a flash of anger. With respect, sir, I think accepting defeat before you've truly fought is what's harmful. David is 17 years old. He has his entire life ahead of him. Don't you think he deserves every possible chance at recovery? What if you're wrong? What if 6 months from now, he's no better and I've put him through false hope again? Maya met his eyes steadily. Then he'll be exactly where he is now, but he'll know that every possible option was tried. And you'll know that you didn't give up on your son when he needed you most. Robert stood and walked to the window, staring out at the city below. Maya waited, knowing this was the moment that would determine everything. Finally, he turned back to her. If I agree to this, I want complete honesty from you. No false promises, no unrealistic timelines. Can you give me that? Absolutely, Maya said without hesitation. Then let's see if miracles really can happen, Robert said, extending his hand. When can you start? Maya's first day at the Wellington estate was nothing like she expected. The house was enormous, more like a hotel than a home, with marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and artwork that probably cost more than most people's houses. A housekeeper named Mrs. Chun showed her to a guest wing where she'd be staying during David's treatment. Mr. David's room is on the second floor, Mrs. Chun explained as they walked through hallways lined with family photos. He doesn't come downstairs much anymore. Meals are usually brought to his room. Maya noticed the photos showed a different David, a smiling, athletic teenager playing soccer, swimming, and laughing with friends. In the most recent pictures, she could see the change. Even before the accident, his smile had started to fade. How has he been lately? Maya asked. Mrs. Chun's face grew sad. Angry, very angry. He doesn't want to see anyone new. The last therapist only lasted 2 weeks before David refused to work with her anymore. Maya felt her stomach tighten. She'd dealt with resistant patients before, but this was different. Everything depended on getting David to trust her. Robert met them at the top of the stairs. David doesn't know you're here yet, he admitted. I thought it might be better to introduce you gradually. Actually, Maya said, I think honesty is the best approach. Can I meet him now? Robert hesitated, then knocked on a door marked with a keep out sign. David, there's someone I'd like you to meet. I told you, Dad, no more doctors. The voice from inside was sharp and tired. She's not a doctor. Her name is Maya, and she's here to help. Help with what? I'm fine the way I am. Maya stepped forward. Can I come in? I promise I'm not here to examine you or ask you to do exercises. I just want to talk. Silence stretched for almost a minute before they heard the click of a lock. The door opened to reveal a 17-year-old boy in a wheelchair. David had his father's dark hair and strong jaw, but his eyes held a hardness that broke Maya's heart. Let me guess, David said, not moving aside to let them in. You're another miracle worker who thinks you can fix me. Maya met his gaze steadily. Actually, I think you're the only one who can fix you. I'm just here to help if you want me to. Something flickered in David's eyes? Surprise, maybe? He'd clearly been expecting the usual pep talk about positive thinking and determination. What makes you different from all the others? He asked. My brother was told he'd never walk again, too. 3 years ago, last month, he ran a 5K race. David's expression didn't change, but Maya noticed his grip on the wheelchair handles relax slightly. Come in, I guess, but I'm not promising anything. David's room was huge but felt like a cave. Heavy curtains blocked most of the sunlight, and expensive exercise equipment sat unused in one corner. The walls were covered with posters of athletes and soccer teams, painful reminders of the life David used to live. Tell me about the accident, Maya said, settling into a chair. Why? So you can pretend to understand what I'm going through? No. So I can understand what we're working with. David was quiet for a moment, then began talking in a flat, emotionless voice. Car accident. Drunk driver ran a red light and hit us. My girlfriend died. I got a broken spine. The end. Maya felt the weight of those words. No wonder David was angry. He was carrying survivor's guilt on top of his physical injuries. I'm sorry about your girlfriend, she said simply. Everyone's sorry. Sorry doesn't change anything. You're right, it doesn't. But working toward recovery might help you find a way to honor her memory. David's head snapped up, anger flashing in his eyes. Don't you dare talk about Lisa. You don't know anything about her or what she meant to me. You're right, I don't. But I know what it's like to watch someone you love suffer and not be able to help them. When my brother was injured, I felt like I was dying too. For the first time, David's anger seemed to waver. What happened to him? Maya spent the next hour telling David about Alex's journey. Not the sanitized version she'd given his father, but the real story, the days Alex cried from frustration, the setbacks that made them both want to quit, the small victories that kept them going. The worst part wasn't the physical therapy, Maya said. It was watching him lose hope. He stopped caring about anything, his friends, his hobbies, his future. Sound familiar? David looked away. Maybe. The doctors here have been treating your spine, but no one's been treating your heart. You can't heal one without the other. Over the next few days, Maya didn't push David to exercise. Instead, she simply spent time with him. She brought her laptop and worked on treatment plans while sitting in his room. She asked about his interests, his friends, the things he missed most about his old life. Slowly, David began to open up. He talked about soccer, about the scholarship he'd lost, about friends who didn't visit anymore because they didn't know what to say. Maya listened without judgment or false optimism. The worst part, David admitted one afternoon, is that everyone expects me to be inspirational. Like I should be grateful to be alive and find some special purpose in all this. But I'm not inspirational. I'm just angry all the time. Anger can be fuel if you use it right, Maya said. The question is what you want to do with all that energy. It was Dr. Harrison, the family's longtime physician, who created the first real crisis. He arrived for David's monthly checkup and was clearly unhappy to find Maya there. Mr. Wellington, Dr. Harrison said coldly, I need to speak with you privately about this ... situation. Maya could hear raised voices from Robert's study. Dr. Harrison was arguing that her methods were unproven and potentially dangerous. He threatened to stop seeing David if Maya continued working with him. When Robert emerged from the meeting, he looked shaken. Dr. Harrison thinks we should reconsider this arrangement, he told Maya. He says David has accepted his condition, and that raising false hopes could cause psychological damage. Maya felt everything she'd worked for slipping away. What do you think? Robert was quiet for a long moment. I think David talks more in the past week than he has in 2 years. I think there's light in his eyes again, even if it's small. And I think Dr. Harrison is scared of being proven wrong. That evening, Maya sat with David in his room. She'd decided to be completely honest with him about the situation. Your doctor wants me to stop working with you, she said. David looked up from the book he'd been reading, the first time she'd seen him with a book since arriving. What did my dad say? He's letting me stay, but I need you to know what we're up against. Not everyone believes recovery is possible. Some people think I'm giving you false hope. David was quiet for several minutes. Then he looked directly at Maya. What if they're right? What if nothing changes? Maya met his gaze. Then at least we'll know we tried everything. But David, I need you to decide if you want to fight this battle with me. Because it's going to be hard, and there will be days when you hate me for pushing you. David stared out the window at the garden below, where he used to play as a child. Finally, he turned back to Maya. When do we start? 3 months into David's treatment, Maya was starting to question everything. The specially designed therapy room in the Wellington mansion had been completed weeks ago, equipped with parallel bars, electrical stimulation machines, and all the equipment Maya had requested. David showed up every day without complaint, working through exercises that would have challenged a healthy athlete. But the progress was painfully slow. Maya kept detailed notes of every session, small improvements that would have excited her. With other patients felt insignificant here, David could sit up straighter in his wheelchair. His muscle tone had improved. His stamina was better. But the big breakthrough, the return of sensation or movement in his legs, remained frustratingly out of reach. Maybe the doctors were right, David said one morning after a particularly difficult session. Sweat dripped from his forehead as Maya helped him back into his wheelchair. Maybe I'm just wasting your time and my dad's money. Maya had heard this doubt creeping into David's voice more often lately. The initial excitement of starting treatment had worn off, replaced by the grinding reality of daily work with little obvious reward. Remember what I told you about Alex? Maya said, adjusting the settings on the electrical stimulation machine. He didn't see major improvements until month 4. Sometimes the body needs time to remember what it's supposed to do, but privately Maya was worried. With Alex, she'd started seeing small signs of sensation returning by this point. David showed no such signs. She'd been so confident when she promised Robert she could help his son walk again. Now that confidence was cracking. The crisis came on a Tuesday morning in late October. David was working on balance exercises, using the parallel bars to support himself while Maya guided his legs through walking motions. It was an exercise they'd done dozens of times before, but today something went wrong. David's left knee buckled unexpectedly, and he crashed to the mat despite Maya's attempts to catch him. The fall itself wasn't serious, just a few bruises, but the psychological impact was devastating. I can't do this anymore, David said, his voice breaking as Maya helped him back into his wheelchair. I can't keep pretending that I'm getting better when I'm not. I can't feel anything, Maya, nothing. That afternoon, Robert called Maya into his study. His face was grim, and Maya knew what was coming before he spoke. Dr. Harrison was here this morning, Robert began. He examined David after the fall and said the lack of progress proves that further treatment is pointless. He's recommending that we stop the therapy and focus on helping David adapt to his limitations. Maya felt her heart sink. Mr. Wellington, 3 months isn't enough time to... Maya, Robert interrupted gently. I've seen David's hope dying a little more each day. Maybe it's time to accept that some things can't be fixed. That evening, Maya sat alone in the therapy room, staring at the equipment that had cost Robert thousands of dollars. She thought about packing her bags and admitting defeat. Maybe everyone was right. Maybe she'd been foolish to think she could succeed where renowned specialists had failed. She was still sitting there when David wheeled in around midnight. Couldn't sleep either? He asked. Maya shook her head. I keep thinking I'm missing something. Some piece of the puzzle that would make everything click. David was quiet for a moment. Mayal, can I ask you something personal? Of course. Was Alex really as bad off as you said? Or did you make his story sound worse so I wouldn't feel hopeless? Mayal looked at David in surprise. Why would you ask that? Because sometimes I think you're too good to be true. Like maybe you're just a really kind person who tells desperate families what they want to hear. Maya felt tears prick her eyes. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her photos until she found what she was looking for. This is Alex 3 months after his accident, she said, showing David the screen. The photo showed a thin, angry-looking young man in a hospital bed, his legs clearly lifeless beneath the blanket. And this is him 6 months later taking his first steps. The second photo showed Alex standing between parallel bars, his face a mixture of concentration and pure joy as he moved 1 foot forward. David stared at the photos for a long time. He really looks like me in that first picture. You have the same eyes, Maya said softly. The same anger, the same fear, the same stubborn determination even when you don't want to admit it. What if I never get to be like him in the second picture? Maya closed her phone and looked directly at David. Then we'll find another version of success. Maybe you won't run marathons, but maybe you'll regain enough function to transfer independently or stand for short periods. Maybe the goal isn't to get your old life back, but to build a new life that's worth living. They sat uncomfortable. Silence for several minutes, then David surprised her. I want to call Alex, he said. Would that be okay? I want to talk to someone who's been where I am. Maya's heart leaped. She hadn't suggested this before because she didn't want David to feel pressured, but she'd been hoping he would ask. He'd love to talk to you. But David, I need to warn you, Alex isn't going to sugarcoat anything. He'll tell you exactly how hard it was and how many times he wanted to quit. Good, I'm tired of people trying to protect me from reality. The next morning, Maya arranged a video call between David and Alex. She left them alone to talk, but she could hear Alex's voice through the closed door, honest, direct, and completely understanding of David's frustration. When David emerged from the call an hour later, something had changed in his face. Alex told me something that made sense, David said. He said the hardest part wasn't learning to move his legs again. It was learning to hope again after he'd convinced himself that hope was dangerous. What else did he say? That recovery isn't about going back to who you were before. It's about discovering who you can become. And that sometimes the person you become is stronger than the person you were before. David paused, looking out the window at the garden where he used to play. Maya, I want to try something different. Instead of focusing on what I can't feel, I want to focus on what I can feel. Alex said that's how his sensations started coming. Back, not all at once, but in tiny pieces he almost missed because he was looking for big changes. That afternoon, they modified David's therapy routine. Instead of going through the motions of walking exercises, Maya had David lie still and focus entirely on sensation. She used feathers, ice cubes, and gentle pressure, asking David to report even the faintest hint of feeling. For the first hour, nothing happened. Then, as Maya was applying gentle pressure to David's left thigh, he suddenly went very still. Wait, he whispered. Do that again. Maya repeated the pressure, her heart pounding. I think ... David's voice was barely audible. I think I felt something, not pain exactly, but ... pressure. Maya tried to keep her voice calm, but inside she was screaming with excitement. Can you feel it when I do this? She pressed a different spot. No, nothing there. But the first spot. Yes, there it is again. It was the smallest possible beginning. A patch of skin the size of a quarter where David could feel faint pressure. But it was sensation where there had been none for 2 years. David looked up at Maya, tears streaming down his face. Does this mean ... It means your nervous system is trying to heal itself, Maya said, her own voice thick with emotion. It means we don't give up. Not now, not ever. For the first time since the accident, David smiled a real, genuine smile. So, what do we do next? The small patch of sensation in David's leg became their North Star. Every day, Maya mapped the areas where feeling was returning, marking them on a chart like explorers discovering new territory. Some days brought exciting progress, sensation, spreading to new areas or becoming stronger. Other days brought setbacks that tested everyone's patience. It's like my leg is waking up after being asleep for 2 years, David explained to his father one evening. Sometimes it feels tingly, sometimes it's just pressure, but it's definitely something. Robert had been cautiously optimistic since the breakthrough, but Maya could see him trying not to get his hopes up too high. Too many disappointments had taught him to guard his heart. Dr. Harrison remained skeptical, even when Maya showed him the detailed charts documenting David's returning sensation. Phantom sensations are common in spinal cord patients, he insisted. This doesn't necessarily mean actual nerve recovery. But Maya had worked with enough patients to know the difference between phantom pain and real sensation. David was healing. Slowly but surely, the first real movement came in month 5, during what had started as a routine therapy session. David was lying on the mat while Maya worked on stretching his legs. She'd been explaining a new exercise when David suddenly interrupted her. Maya, stop talking and look at my foot. Maya looked down and nearly dropped the stretch band she was holding. David's right foot was moving, just a tiny twitch, but it was voluntary movement. Did you just... Maya's voice trailed off. I think I moved my toe. Can you see it? David was staring intently at his foot, his face a mixture of concentration and disbelief. "Do it again," Maya whispered. David closed his eyes, his forehead creased with effort. For a moment, nothing happened. Then slowly, his big toe moved upward about half an inch. Maya let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "David, you just moved your toe." The celebration was brief because they both knew how fragile this progress was. One tiny movement didn't mean David would walk again, but it meant his spinal cord was capable of sending signals to his legs. It meant the impossible might actually be possible. Word of David's movement spread quickly through the household. Robert rushed home from work to see for himself. Mrs. Chun, the housekeeper who had become like family to David, cried tears of joy when she witnessed the toe movement. Even the gardener and the security staff found excuses to check on David's progress, but it was Dr. Harrison's reaction that surprised everyone. When he examined David the following week and confirmed the voluntary movement, his entire demeanor changed. "I owe you an apology, Miss Rodriguez," he said quietly after the examination. "I've been practicing medicine for 30 years and I thought I'd seen everything. This is remarkable." Maya appreciated the apology, but her focus remained on David's continued improvement. The toe movement was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, David regained control over more muscles in his feet and lower legs. The sensation continued spreading, bringing with it the ability to feel temperature, texture, and even pain. "The pain is actually good news," Maya explained to David after he complained about his legs aching during therapy. "Pain means your nerves are connecting properly. It means your body is remembering how to communicate with itself." The day David stood up without assistance marked exactly 6 months since Maya had first walked into the Wellington mansion. It happened during their morning session, as David was practicing transfers from his wheelchair to the therapy table. "I want to try something," David said suddenly. He positioned his feet flat on the floor and gripped the armrests of his wheelchair. "Maya, stand behind me in case I fall." Maya moved into position, her hands ready to catch David if needed. She'd seen this moment with Alex and with other patients, but it never stopped being magical. David took a deep breath and pushed himself up. His legs shook with the effort, but they held his weight. For 10 seconds, then 20, then 30. David Wellington stood on his own 2 feet. "Dad!" David called out, his voice breaking with emotion. "Dad, come here." Robert burst into the therapy room just as David was settling back into his wheelchair, exhausted but triumphant. "I stood up, Dad. I actually stood up." Robert's face went through a dozen emotions at once: joy, relief, pride, and something that looked like the lifting of a 2-year burden he'd been carrying. The local news picked up the story first. A reporter who had covered David's original accident heard about his recovery and asked for an interview. Maya was hesitant about the publicity, but David surprised her by agreeing to talk. "If our story helps one other family not give up hope, then it's worth it," David said. The interview aired on the evening news just as David was taking his first independent steps. The video showed him walking slowly between parallel bars. Maya staying close by for safety, his face showing intense concentration mixed with pure joy. The story went viral. Maya's phone rang constantly with calls from other families facing similar challenges, from doctors wanting to learn about her methods, and from medical journals asking her to write about David's case. But the moment that mattered most to Maya came 3 weeks later at David's high school graduation. The ceremony was held in the school's gymnasium, with families packed into bleachers and graduates seated in folding chairs on the gymnasium floor. When David's name was called, a hush fell over the crowd. Everyone knew his story: the accident, the years in a wheelchair, the miraculous recovery. David rose from his seat slowly and walked across the stage to receive his diploma. The applause started softly, then built to a thunderous standing ovation that lasted several minutes. David stood at the podium, diploma in hand, tears streaming down his face as he looked out at the crowd. Maya watched from the audience, sitting between Robert and Alex, who had flown in for the ceremony. She thought about that night at the charity gala when she'd made an impossible promise to a stranger. She thought about all the moments of doubt, the setbacks, the small victories that had led to this triumph. "Thank you," David said into the microphone, his voice carrying clearly through the gymnasium. "Thank you to everyone who refused to let me give up on myself. To my dad, who never stopped believing. To Maya, who taught me that impossible is just a word, and to Lisa, who I know would be proud of how far we've all come." As David walked off the stage, Maya felt a hand on her shoulder. Robert was looking at her with tears in his eyes. "You gave me my son back," he said simply, but Maya knew. The truth was more complicated than that. David had saved himself. She'd just shown him that he was worth saving. 6 months later, Maya opened the Wellington Recovery Center, funded by Robert and designed to help other patients who had been told their cases were hopeless. David, now walking with only a slight limp and planning to study physical therapy in college, worked there part-time, sharing his story with new patients. "The most important thing I learned," David would tell them, "is that recovery isn't about getting back to who you were before. It's about discovering who you're meant to become. And sometimes that person is stronger than you ever imagined possible."